Well, those are two different questions, and let's try to pull them apart and answer them one at a time. First of all, if you have an employee that does not follow directions, I think you have to ask yourself, did we clarify the directions? Does that employee know what you expect of them? And so I think it's important for you to meet with the employee and clarify your expectations. The second part of the question, I think, has to deal with performance. And performance, as Dr. Ken Blanchard said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And what you're trying to do is let an employee know how he or she is doing at regular intervals. So every month, I would encourage managers to sit down with their employees and let them know how they're doing and how they can improve their performance. And I think that way you keep an employee focused, on track, and you get better results.
A question from Celaya, Guanajuato, Mexico. The question from the Instituto Tecnológico. Thank you. Good morning. This is Dr. Antonio Rochard from the Tecnológico de Celaya. The question is, can you tell me what the difference is between a coach and a mentor?
That's a good question, Doctor. I think the primary difference between a coach and a mentor is that a coach has a formal responsibility to grow that person and to shape their performance. If you take the example of a coach of a soccer team, what he or she is trying to do as a coach is to take a given talent and help that talent, that individual, if you will, that player, improve his or her performance. A mentor relationship is different. That's where you're going to take me under your wing because you believe that I have the potential to be something greater, maybe not this year, but in future years. So you want to groom me so that I have a broader understanding of leadership issues, of management experience, so that I can be a greater asset to the company long term. I would say mentoring is more of a voluntary role, whereas coaching is much more of a hired gun role.
A question from Panama, from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Good morning. This question is from the Institute for Hydraulic Resources and Electrification of Panama. At a company where you see different levels of hierarchy and academic training, how can we use or select coaching so that it is successful?
You're going to have a number of different levels of talent within any organization. I think the secret is to respect the fact that you will have average players and you will have a few superstars. You have to coach those people differently. In the United States, in the world of professional basketball, we have a superstar basketball player named Michael Jordan. And I'm sure that the coach of Michael Jordan, who plays for the Chicago Bulls, coaches Michael differently than he would coach the other players on his team. Respect the differences in terms of the talent that your people have and try to work with them at their particular level and gradually bring them up to a higher level.
Let us now receive a call from Cuautitlán, State of Mexico, from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, Facultad de Estudios Superiores. Go ahead. Adelante. We're listening. It appears that the call was cut off.
Vamos a formular una pregunta que nos ha llegado vía fax.
We received a question via fax from the Instituto Tecnológico de Cerro Azul, Veracruz, Mexico. It states, you indicated that coaching is a skill that cannot be learned. I'm inclined to agree with you. However, if the knack for coaching does not come easily to someone like myself, what suggestions do you have to help me become a more effective manager?
I think it starts within the self. I think it's very important for the individual to recognize his or her strengths and abilities and talents in terms of coaching. I think if you want to learn, and it doesn't come naturally to you, that you make the commitment to learn. I'd like to suggest something that's a little offbeat. I'd like to encourage you to find one or two teams in your city, in your area. Maybe it's a soccer team, maybe it's a swim team. It could be at the high school. And go out and meet the coaches of those teams and ask the coaches what he or she is doing to improve performance and to be more successful as a coach and also to get better results with your players. I think if you would do that, you can see how people coach, the techniques that they use, as well as the results that they get.
From Mexico, we are now going on to Lima from the Instituto Nacional de Investigación y Capacitación de Telecomunicaciones from Lima, Peru. Go ahead. Thank you. I have three questions I would like to ask. What difference is there between a leader and a coach? Then how do you love people given the natural competition that exists between people in any given company? And the third is how to maintain respect between the coach and their team. And lastly, to be a coach, do you have to have been a good team player, speaking operationally? Thank you.
Those are excellent questions. Let me try to take them one at a time. I think the difference between a leader and a coach is that a leader probably has coached. I think a leader has passed that level where he is working hands-on with people. A leader is more about the vision. A coach is more about the doing. And so I think that's the primary difference between a leader and a coach. However, according to my definition, which I'll share with you in our next segment, I think leadership is about helping people surpass themselves. Certainly, a coach is about helping people surpass themselves as well. Your second point about how to love people in light of the competitive environment, I think you just have to feel a genuine sense of pride and respect for human beings. There is no leader who has ever accomplished anything without people. So it's very important that in your heart that you love people and that you respect the differences of people, which, by the way, is also an important attribute of coaching, because a coach has many different people, many different levels of ability, and so I think it starts with love in your heart. And that is very difficult for many managers because they come to business thinking that it's all about work, when in fact work is the result of people. The third point, very briefly, about respect between a coach and a player, if you're a good coach and if you're growing people, your teammates, your players are going to respect you. And that's true in the workplace as well. I think there was one more part to that question that I didn't quite catch, Armando, but hopefully we've covered that.
We want to remind the speakers once again that there is only one question per call. Many people want to participate, so once again we'd like to ask one question per phone call as brief as possible. The next question is from the northern part of Mexico, Sinaloa, from Guamuchi. Go ahead. Yes, how do we share knowledge, skills, and wisdom to improve other people's performance in educational institutions where you have a great wealth of knowledge and ability?
Well, first of all, I would agree that you do have an abundance of knowledge, skills, and wisdom in higher education in the universities. Let me try to share with you the model that we are using here in the United States and specifically in California. What we're trying to do is form partnerships between corporations and government agencies and universities, whether they are 2-year universities or a 4-year university. Through that partnership, companies can bring their people into a learning environment, and I think that stimulates the knowledge and the skills and the wisdom. You want to make sure that companies and government agencies in your area know not only of your presence, but they know your capabilities as well. So I would encourage you to make sure that you form a partnership with different companies and have some kind of an outreach program to companies in the workplace.
Thank you so much. We will now receive a call from Córdoba, Argentina, from the Instituto Universidad de Empresa, Universidad Blas Pascal. Go ahead. Disculpe, le voy a pedir que se retire de la...
Nuestra pregunta sería que...
Away from the screen and repeat your question. Adelante.
Bien. Les comentaba que las ideas que hemos escuchado hasta ahora...
The ideas that we've heard expressed up until now have been quite interesting. That fact notwithstanding, there is a concern in the fact that these ideas, in order to generate long-term results, require persistence in the model selected. In order to achieve this persistence, any organization must overcome a series of critical situations. My question would be how to do this, how to define in practical and operational terms the flexibility required to obtain the results that have been established.
There are a lot of different ways that you can approach this. I wish I knew the nature of your particular organization or the challenge that you're referring to, but typically in my work with the Customer Relations Institute, and we work with many companies and organizations around the world, I find that the greatest challenge within the organization to making a coaching program or a mentoring program take root is a cultural barrier. And by culture, I'm talking about the style of management or leadership that senior executives in a company use to either create results or drive their people by fear. If you have an organization that is based on management by fear, it's going to be very difficult to create a coaching environment or a successful mentoring program. On the other hand, I would say that one way that you can improve your performance long term, and you do have to be persistent about this, is to start within your own sphere of control. In other words, your department, the people that report to you, and begin to have some successes on a short-term basis. When you have a success, other managers are going to look to you and say, what are you doing right? And maybe we could take that idea in our department and apply it as well.
Saludamos ahora a nuestros vecinos aquí en
Our
la ciudad de Tijuana.
neighbors
La
from
siguiente pregunta la formulan de la
Tijuana, Baja
Universidad
California, Mexico,
Iberoamericana,
from the
Campus
Universidad
Noroeste.
Iberoamericana, Campus
Escuchamos.
Noroeste. Go ahead. How do the internal power struggles affect this process within a company, and how does this affect the communication process as a whole?
You're always going to have a number of internal struggles within a company. It's very natural. And the reason that it's natural is that you have competing interests. You have competing ideologies, you have competing marketing approaches, and you have competing resources. People want your budget. So you're always going to have that clash in an organization. I guess the key is that there are obviously goals and objectives that your company or organization has set, and you have to be sure that everybody is working for the common good of the goals. There are a lot of different ways that you can accomplish a goal, but you want to make sure that at least in your organization, people are moving on parallel courses. I would just accept the fact that in an organization you are going to have conflict, but that is not an excuse not to work together and not to grow the organization through a coaching or mentoring type process.
Vamos a atender otra llamada que nos llega
A call
también
is
de la
coming
ciudad de
in
Tijuana. Esta
from
vez la hacen del
Tijuana,
Instituto
once again
Politécnico
from the
Nacional
Instituto Politécnico
Tijuana,
Nacional
Baja California,
CITEDI,
México.
Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. Good morning. Good morning.
¿Cómo atiende el programa de mentores la promoción laboral?
Wha-
Animar al resto del equipo.
How does this mentoring program... Disculpe, le voy a pedir...
Sí. ¿Cómo atiende el programa de
How
mentores
does this
la promoción
mentoring
laboral
program look
para
at
animar al resto
work
del equipo
promotion
que muestran
without
otras habilidades
demotivating
y establecer
other
el
team
interés
members that have a vital experience or knowledge that is important in that particular company?
Well, I think the success of a mentoring program is that you're pairing two individuals from different levels of the organization or different departments of the organization so that they can learn from each other. For example, if Armando is a senior manager and I'm an engineer who has just started, I want to make sure that I'm going to learn from him. But he also wants to learn from me because maybe he's been with the company for 20 years and he forgot what it's like to be the new kid on the block. So I think it's important that people respect the fact that in a 3-week period, which is very short, I'm going to meet with my counterpart at least twice a week. I'm going to try to learn from him as he will learn from me, and then evaluate that process. And that way, when you get the feedback, you can tweak or improve your process. And when you re-begin the mentoring program for the next cycle, the next 3 weeks, obviously I'm going to be paired with somebody different at that point. So I think over the course of 12 or 15 weeks, it really works through the cycle, and usually people feel very good about it because they've had broad experiences.
Viajamos ahora a México,
We now
Distrito
travel
Federal.
to Mexico
La pregunta la
City.
formulan
The
desde la
question
Comisión Federal
is
de
submitted by
Electricidad,
the Comisión Federal de
Auditorio
Electricidad,
Atoyac,
Auditorio
México.
Atoyac,
Escuchamos.
Mexico.
Gracias, buenos días.
Thank you. Good morning. What
Pueden tener las
long-term
empresas
repercussions can those companies see, those of them that don't use coaching and where they have an authoritarian style of leadership?
Well, first of all, you need to recognize that there are many different techniques or tactics that you can use, programs that you can use to grow your company. I think the big problem in many companies that are regressive, that maintain the status quo, that do not progress, is that they are going to be forced either out of business or they're going to be forced to change. So if you have the long-term repercussions to not implementing some kind of professional development or growth program where you invest in your people and grow them, they're going to leave your company or your agency, and you're going to lose good talent. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to recover. And I think that's the most severe repercussion.
Nos conectamos ahora con
We
República
will now
Dominicana. La pregunta
listen
la
to a call
formulan
from the
desde la
Dominican
Universidad del Caribe
Republic,
en
from
Santo
the
Domingo.
Universidad del Caribe, Santo Domingo.
¿Cuáles son las
Good morning. What are the
¿Cuáles son los indicadores
indicators, the numeric indicators that a company can use to measure efficient leadership?
Well, I think there are many. First of all, if you are a publicly traded company, you can look at your stock price. I think in sports, the best way to look at your leadership is the wins versus the losses. So if your stock price is growing, if you're having more wins than you are defeats, your leadership is probably pretty good. I think another indicator is the productivity per employee. How much is the company earning per employee? There are many different ways to measure competence in terms of leadership and also productivity. And if we could get your name, I'd be happy to, and your address, I'd be delighted to send you some of those and a list that I could recommend on performance measurement.
Regresamos ahora al Estado de México.
We return once again to the state of Mexico. The question is submitted by the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, Universidad Hispanoamericana, Mexico. The coach should share should a coach share his doubts or fears with the team, and how is this coaching process applicable to countries and states of crisis? Thank you very much from Coatzacoalco.
The question is, should a coach share his or her doubts and fears with the players? I would be hesitant to encourage a coach to share his doubts and fears with the players, because the players, or the employees in this case, look to their coach for inspiration, for guidance, and to uplift the spirit. And if you and I were preparing for the big game, or in business terms trying to prepare a major product, and the manager or the coach came to us and said, I've got some real doubts about whether or not you can do this, that weakens my self-esteem, lowers my confidence, and I think it causes a negative repercussion in the organization. So I would be hesitant to encourage you to speak openly about your fears and doubts, and instead I would be a realist and try to encourage a positive note that is based on fact, so that the players know where they stand in the organization.
Regresamos ahora a la frontera
We return to the U.S.-Mexico border, to the city of Tecate, Baja California. The question is submitted by the Centro de Capacitación para el Trabajo Industrial Tecate. Yes, what is your opinion? Le voy a favor de repetir la pregunta. Yes, what's your opinion in regard to using TOP for measuring performance, or what specific tools would you recommend? TOP? It appears that the call was... Sí, adelante.
Sí.
What is your opinion regarding using TOP to measure performance or results? What tools would you use? TOP is the #1 system, or system 1, the one system.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think rather than try to speak to a particular system, let me say that the caller has a good point. You have to measure performance. People need to know the score. People need to know how they're doing. And I think there are a number of excellent systems out there that you can use to measure that performance. I think the key here is that you want to let your employees know how they're doing. Every team wants to know, how are they doing? Every player on a team wants to know, how am I performing? How can I get better? And I think the role of the manager or the coach is to make sure that the employee knows how he or she is doing frequently, so that the employee can improve performance. And I think that's the key, regardless of what measurement system you might prefer to use.
Bien, ahora un saludo para Brasil. La pregunta la formula del
Welcome to
Servicio
Brazil. The question
Brasileño
is
de
submitted
Apoyo
by
a las
the
Pequeñas
Servicio
y Medianas
Brasileño de Apoyos para
Microindustrias.
Microindustrias y Negocios en Brasil. Go ahead.
Brasil.
Brasil?
Parece
Brazil?
que está en la línea, le escuchamos.
You're online. Go ahead.
Dificultades de las comunicaciones. Vamos
Technical
a dar
participación
participación a una
We are
pregunta que nos llegó vía
going
fax de la
to
división
answer a question via
Oriente de
fax
Jalapa,
from
Veracruz, México.
Jalapa,
Dice,
Veracruz,
¿cree usted que el
Mexico.
tema del
Do you
coaching
believe
se ha
that
popularizado
coaching
más
has
en círculos de
become
negocios
more popular in
principalmente
business circles
porque las empresas
primarily
buscan la
because
manera de
companies
mejorar
are looking for ways
desempeño
to
y
increase
resultados?
one's performance and results?
Yes, absolutely.
Sí,
And I think the reason for that
absolutamente.
is that customers have a higher expectation of a company, their product and services, whether you are in the private sector or the public sector. The customers are demanding so much more. I think the second part of that is that talent is very hard to come by nowadays. And so a company is asking more and more of their managers to be experts in many, many more subject areas. So it's real important for a company to implement some kind of a program that grows people within. Peter Senge, who wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline, talks about creating a learning organization. And I think what I see happening around the world is that more and more companies are trying to create a learning university within their own organization so that they can improve performance and results. And coaching is one valuable way to do that.
Vamos a insistir con Brasil. Brasilia
Once
nos
again,
escucha,
from
nos llaman del Servicio Brasileño de
Brazil,
Apoyo a
from
la
the
Micro y
Servicio
Pequeña
Brasileño de
Empresa.
Apoyo para la
Adelante.
Micro y Pequeña Empresa. Go ahead.
Brasil.
Brazil, go ahead.
Well, as we're talking about manager, would you like you to make a comment?
Yes, can you repeat the question? Once again, please.
As we're talking about manager,
Al hablar de
would you like to know your comment about the difference about coach and consultant?
Well, I think the biggest difference is a coach carries a towel to wipe the sweat, and a consultant carries a briefcase full of watches. On a serious note, I think a coach is somebody who is there for a long period of time working with the employees to try to help them improve performance. Whereas a consultant, such as myself, comes into an organization for a limited period of time to try to fix a specific problem or perhaps help resolve a particular work process. I think that's the major difference.
Nos vamos ahora a la paradisíaca ciudad de Acapulco.
Now we go
Acapulco,
to
Guerrero.
the
La
paradise
pregunta la
city of
formulan del
Acapulco,
Instituto
Guerrero,
Tecnológico
from
de
the
Acapulco.
Instituto
Escuchamos.
Tecnológico de Acapulco. Go ahead. Good morning. How do you ensure leaders walking the talk? That is to say, what mechanisms can their colleagues or subordinates use to help the leader walk the talk? And the second would be to ask you for a more detailed explanation in regard to your comment that states the more things change, the more they remain the same. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think to answer your first part with respect to walking the talk, it's very important that you hire the right leader. That's number one. Secondly, one of the things that a leader can do is to shape a culture of open learning, of trust, of respect, And these are some of the values that progressive companies and government agencies that I've worked with in the last several years are embracing. You're not going to encourage people